Hello everyone, my name is BetNobiX, and today I wanted to go over actually building a level like this. So I actually had quite a few people who were impressed by the level that was used for this video. So I wanted to take this and show you how I went from idea and actually implemented them and built this area. I know it's not a full game level, but it's enough to actually give you ideas on how to actually build this. So what I did is I came into this with a couple ideas in mind. I had a character that was on a mission to sneak into a military base, so that way it gave me plenty of ideas of how to tell the player where to go. So I decided on a secret air base hidden in the jungle because I knew that I had a jungle pack that has a really high quality, and I knew I had military models that would work for it. And then I knew that I wanted it to be kind of a stealthy mission, so I knew that I needed to have obstacles to place around for the character to be able to sneak behind, and I needed areas for them to go across. Then I had a little background ideas of having AIs that were patrolling, but I didn't actually have time to implement that in the video. I don't have time to implement that in this video, but I can at least show you how to make the level. So with all this in mind, I know that I want the character to be able to walk, jump, and that would all be used in tandem with the ability to crouch to be able to hide and avoid detection. So with that in mind, I knew that I wanted to use my jungle and everything to my advantage. So let's just name it ambush because the place looks like a giant bush. The level is ambush. So what I did is I started with my environment lighting mixer and I placed everything down. But I actually have a little program called Ultra Dynamic Skylight. An ultra dynamic sky that I tend to use as of late because it's a bit faster to work with than building a new one every time. It's not super expensive and it's actually pretty nice, so I'm going to drag these in here. It just gives me a couple of extra settings like rain and better looking clouds. This is on the Fab Marketplace if anybody is interested in using it. Then I'll just set this to partially cloudy. And so that's just some lighting. That's just the directional light and some clouds. Which if I wanted to place those down, it would be the windows and then environment mixer. And I would drop in everything on here. So yeah, now we've got our basic sky, which we drop in every time anyway. Now we need a landscape and a layout in mind. So here's where, if you needed the time, you could go through and start looking at references of jungles to be able to get your idea of what they look like. And then there are multiple different programs you can look at. If I have time, I'll put them in the description below that allow you to just set your images aside. And you would use those as your references while you're building it to keep in mind. And then you have to remember that, okay, so I need to pay attention to verticality, the horizontal distance, and making sure everything fits the size of the character and well, pretty much just your proportions and scale. You need to pay attention to those. So what I did was I created a landscape. And because I already had everything in mind of what I wanted to do for the level, I just knew that I needed a path system. And in jungles, there's a lot of areas where you have down vertical slopes. So I was able to create areas. So I go to landscape mode and I created a landscape and I add all the layers to them. And I'm going to keep 8 by 8 because that's all that was necessary, but then I raised it to 9 by 9 because I wanted background distance. So I hit create, knowing that I need more extra area, so I created those extra spots. So what I did was I decided to go ahead and sculpt the landscape. So for this specific one, I know that I needed an outer area that the player can't see over. So I started with sculpting a little outer area. And what I did was I will sculpt up a little bit, and I'll use a flatten tool to go all the way around. And that's a little egregious, we don't need to go that high. There we go. So this will be fine because we can go down instead of just going up. And that going down's a bit easier than going up in a good scale. So I can drag this around and kind of go over the corners with it. And I only need to go over some of the corners because I need a little area for the thing to exit. So my idea was to have an area that the players can go through, and this little quarry area can have a little exit out of it. And what that is going to be is a bit higher over here now. So now I can go a little bit higher over here, and then I can start using the flatten tool to make a multi-layered area instead of just a single layer. So I can drag across here, and I can drag like that. And this will give me a way to play around with different scales and stuff. I mean, different view angles and stuff. So my little spawn area is going to be this little spot right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move it over about here. So I'm going to take it right here, slide it over to about here. And what I'm going to do is going to shrink my brush size, use the flatten tool to go around here. The flatten tool is a really nice tool if you want to learn how to use all these brushes. I have a landscape tutorial that will teach you how to use all these brushes, and then I'm just using them to make my landscape. I don't tend to use height maps all the time. They're very nice, useful tools, but I don't always use them. So here we go. And now we've got a little area set up. So I might advance it a little bit for the video because I was on a time schedule for the other one. This one I have a bit more time to work with, so boom. There we go. So now I know that I have the area that goes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this area rise up a little bit more. And I'm going to take that height from over here and go off. And what you could do is you can actually click here, go off map, and then come up on another spot, and it'll keep that height. So you can make those gaps anywhere you want doing that. So we're going to go through and make this look pretty later. First, we want the functionality and everything going. So what we need to do is we also need to test if this is too big for trees. So my Rainforest pack is the one I know I'm going to be using, so I'm going to use that as an idea for the trees. So my tree, let's go ahead and get a decent tree. There we go. So now we got a tree for scale and everything. All right, so now we know how big stuff is. This should be a decent little area for the character to be able to start in. So now we can go ahead and go across and kind of create little areas. I like to use the flatten tool because it allows me to create set areas and kind of mold it into shape before I start making it into mountain. So now I've got this little area. This is where the car was located. I can kind of smooth down over here. Kind of get this into a more unique shape. I can use the erosion tool to kind of give a bit of texture to this area. And now I can smooth again, but weaken it. So there we go. That's where our car came down. And now I go to car. And it should be the cargo van right there. That is the cargo van we used. So now that we've got the cargo van over here, we've got the little area set up. We know that we want the van to be sitting right here because it was used to light the area. And so what I can do is I can do a few different things. I can set the van right here, or I can set up a little area that the player drove down, but then I had to put up blocking volume. And it's kind of got to tell the player why they couldn't come over here. Why they can't go up there. Or it just feels like a weird invisible block right there. Which is fine in a lot of cases. And if I wanted to do that, I should have if I wanted to do that, I do have this van I could use instead. And so if I wanted to be able to give them a little area to work with, I could have this be they drove their Jeep down here and now they've got a little setup going on. And this is where they can gear up and set up their loadout for the mission ahead of time. And I could just do a simple, there's a bumpy road right here that they can use to get up there, get up and down. So yeah, there's a few different things I could go about doing this. And we'll go about how to hide the background areas here in a minute. So yeah, now we've got this little car here where they have a little spot set up where you can actually adjust your inventory if you wanted them to be able to. So what I want to do is I need to flatten some areas around here. Kind of give a bit of playroom so it's not all just super mountains everywhere. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of guide the player using this little mountain area. So that way they only have one direction to go. So now they've got this area to go and that's it. And you could do multiple things. You can make it to where there's rocks and they drop down so they can't go back if you wanted to. I'm going to make a little area where they can go back. So I'm going to use the ramp tool to kind of smooth that out without any extra effort. I'm going to smooth along here. And there we go. So now we got this little area you can travel on down and see where you're going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of hide over here a little bit at first. So that way the player's got plenty to explore right now. They don't need too much wild amounts to look at. And I could even take it a step further by dragging this over here and dragging this to come around and come down this way. So that way it doesn't just start and head right out there, but the player actually has to go over here and find the little area to peek over at. So this will be used later on. So now that we've got this area set up, and of course we'll block off their little spot right here. So that way they kind of have to look forward and then it kind of comes over here to go down. So now they've got their little path to start, come over here, and then come on down. So now they've got their location and startup, and here's our little peek out point. And how we can kind of hide this is we can actually take our little flatten over here, kind of flatten out over there and make them have to kind of backtrack a little bit in order to go forward. So that way they don't have the ability to miss what's going on there. They don't just see the path instantly. So they'll step out here and they'll see out there into the jungle, and that's where the military base is going to be and the roads. So now we've given the player a starting area, and of course we're going to come back and make this look nice later. So now what we need is an obstacle to really make the player have to go around to make it to the point. So what I want is I want a road system. And so I decided to make a road system. So I needed to take areas that kind of caught up around here, but didn't do it directly next to it. So I created a little flat system around here that was connected to the little ravine edge. I need to strengthen this a bit. And this gives me plenty of area to play with to lay my roads out. Here we go. And this will also give the player the ability to see trees up there and everything. So now we've got this little area. We can kind of ramp along here. A little bit further. So now we can take this and kind of flatten over. You'll notice that I use these two tools a lot because they are very useful when used properly. So you notice now I have this big old pathway along here, and I can fully connect it to the bottom of this area right here because this was used in the original idea. So now I can kind of just smooth it all together. Should make it to match all right. So there we go. Now we've got this area for the road to be able to kind of connect to the player's path. And I don't want a super large amount of area, so now I just need to kind of make it a bit smoother of a connection point. And then we can really get into shrinking the area. So now I just need to know how much area is needed for this road. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to manage. And I'm going to go to splines. And I'm going to hit plus on layers. You're going to create a edit spline layer. It's from the spline layer. I'm going to hit G to make sure that, okay, so if things are visible, you can hold control and then click over here. And I'm going to click again, and then click again, click again. And this will follow along the landscape. So this is a bit too far away. So I need to kind of get a better view. All right, so there we go. So there we go. Now we've got a road and an idea of the scale that's needed for it. So we go. Now we have the areas meet together. And now I need to go in and resculpt this spot. You make sure to switch between them. And now we can switch between them to really, because I want to hide this area a little bit. And I need it to kind of work a bit better because we wouldn't want the road to notice over there. Because the idea is that the bad guys don't know about it. So you're using it to get across. And they think it's just a natural obstruction. There we go. We kind of smooth. There we go. And now we can actually take our noise tool, lower the strength a bit, and kind of give this area some texture. There we go. Instead of it just being flat, it's now got textures to it. There we go. So now it's not just a basic, bland, smoothed out hill. And that really will make it feel a bit more natural. And now I need to kind of expand it over a bit more. It's not reaching far enough over for it to really be sold that they wouldn't know about it. There we go. And that's a bit better. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this and drag it over a bit more to the centered area. Because like I said, we don't want it to feel like they should have known about it the whole time. Because the idea is you're sneaking in. So there we go. Now we've got our little pathing going on. There we go. So we got this little hidden ravine that you found to get into the area. And you've got your little spot right here that connects them. So we're going to kind of get rid of a bit more of this path right here to be able to hide it from the player. So there we go. So now you follow, so you come out, you step around, you step out here, you see across. This is actually raised up a little bit more than I would want it to be. So I can actually, seeing the flat lines right here, I now know where I can cut. So what I'm going to do now is using my road, I can flatten and cut a big chunk of this area out so I don't have excess area that I don't need. I just need enough area for the road and the checkpoint. So now when I peek over this little hill right here, I can see directly off the little landscape. There we go. What I can even do is I can actually sculpt this up a little bit. So it kind of makes the player walk up into this area. There we go. So now when you come up, it gives you this high look of the entire location, and you have to peek down to see it. And still, you have to go backwards to go forwards. And it also kind of hides it a bit better, because now the area looks a bit more of a natural state of they shouldn't be coming from here. And then, of course, we would put a few things to be able to get this area looking a bit nicer. All right, so let's stop working over there for now. What we're going to do is we're going to go over and focus around here now. So we're going to take and start making our little area a bit more of a obstacle. So we know where the road's going over here, so we know it's going to come around here and come down right there. So what we need to do is we need to sculpt and make this area a bit lower. There we go. So now it's lower, And it's almost to a point that it's too low, but now we can kind of adjust. And it's going to be testing and testing and testing to find the good height. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this lower part, and I'm going to kind of go down there, because we need this tree to be able to fit inside of it. So that way when you look across, you can still see the other side from the road here. So it's keeping these angles in mind while you're building this ravine to be able to be usable still, instead of it just being there to be there. So we can raise this up a tad bit even, to about right there. Because the road goes down. We don't even have to have it go down fully right here. We can actually take right here, kind of flatten over and make that raise up a bit. So we come across this area when we come down. So you come down and you come over, come off this area, and it smooths out. It connects directly into the road. So there, now we have a connection point. So what we need is the area to be set up for the little camp over here. So I need to build areas to hide the background so the player isn't tempted to look around too incredibly amount. But they also don't feel trapped as though this is a sealed area. So how we're going to do that is we're going to block off areas so there's not any access points. So there we go. So now there's no access points other than the little camp we'll be setting up here. So I can still raise a few spots around here. And then of course I know I have the lookout tower in there, so I need to make the background areas high enough that they can't see off into the distance forever. And how we're going to take care of that is we're going to actually save. We're going to leave landscape mode and we're going to look up cliffs. Well, I believe I use mountains. I missed it in. So I have a couple of mountains that are background mountains. And a lot of packs come with these, so if I type in background, there's quite often I will find something for backgrounds. Here they are. So I use these mountains for the level prior. So with these mountains, what I'm going to do is they're a little too tall for what I want, so I'm going to shrink them down vertically so they're a bit more matching to the distance. And it's fine for now. They don't have to look incredible. They're going to be covered in trees later, so you won't really notice them too much. But I can take these and duplicate, rotate them. I'm going to set their materials to two-sided to help them kind of have better shadows. So there we go. So now we're going to take little angles and stuff, kind of build around the area a bit. We're going to use different kinds. And we're even going to multi-layer them. So back here, I'm going to even add another. So from the little spot down here, it really seems like it goes on for a while, but I need a good spot where it kind of hides all of it. Raise some of the vertical back. There we go. So now we've got these mountains going off in the distance. And that'll make the world feel way larger than it actually is. So when I duplicate this over, I can spin it backwards. And when I move it over here, it now no longer feels like it's the same mountain. And this is going to help us to really sell the world a bit more as a open area. So you'll never see over these ridges other than maybe on a lookout tower or two. So now you'll already see we've got our area where the military base is going to go. We have our area where one of the checkpoints are going to go, and we even have an area for a third checkpoint if we wanted one. So now we go from here and we actually sculpt the landscape the rest of the way. Alright, so we crashed, so it's going to take us a moment to get back to where we were. Alright, so luckily we had just swapped levels to be able to figure out which mountains were where. So we're going to take these and we're going to kind of lay them out again. of course, the design might change a little because we've lost which mountains we were using. So there we go. Now I got a little heavily mountained area. Kind of take these. Oh, they're all raised up. That's what's going on. And raise this one back up, actually. So that one's the farthest off in the distance. And this will all be affected later on. We won't have to worry about that just yet. First, we just need to get the area worked and laid out how we want it to be. Of course, we need to make little gaps between the mountains because they're not just constant mountains everywhere. Because these are so low poly, we can actually go quite nice with them because they don't have to have massive detail. There we go. There's that. We're going to take this one, duplicate it over, add another one right here. And here we go. We should have decent area to play around with. And what this is going to allow us to do is when we go to paint trees around, we'll be able to get trees going up and around and everything. It also help the player to believe that the world is much larger than it is, which is a nice key aspect to this. So there we go. That's all we're going to play around with now. We'll worry about the rest later. So we'll get into the trees in a second. For now, we need to get in and finish our landscape. So once we're in here, we're going to go back into sculpting. We're going to kind of get this area back into what it needs to be, which is down here. All right, so now we need to set it along. And I already have the hanger I want to use, but when you're designing your level, you'll have to come with the up with the building and everything that you're wanting to use. So if I want my hanger in here, hanger. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to my military base. Military airport. There we go. Meshes. I need to find the buildings, so I need an area that can fit my hangar and my at least one runway. So I have a hangar here. So looking at this, the landscape's pretty massive, which is good to know. So with this, you can take it over here, and now we can actually start scaling it to the proper size. Before, we just wanted to get the layout going. So there's our road, it comes on down, and here is our hangar. Am I even using the right hangar? I'm not using the right hangar. That's why it seems so small. This is the hangar we wanted to use. That makes a lot more sense. I didn't think we were that off. Okay. So now that we've got the hangar going, we can go in, go to meshes, go to the runway that goes with it, and we can duplicate and swap the mesh. Here we go, 90. Now I need to slide it up a little bit. Just enough where the road is sticking out of the ground. I need to flatten the area a bit more. So there we go. Now we have area flattened. I need to take this, slide it down, and slide it over to the hangar, and make the hangar kind of match by going down nearly to the bottom. There we go. So now we've got the hangar with the little runway. Of course, it needs to be a longer one. There we go. It's a bit too much. Let's go with this road. And what we can kind of do that we didn't do on the other one is kind of connect the areas a bit better. So I'm going to use this road instead of the road I used last time to kind of make it match much nicer. So here we are. We need to really get this working. So what we're going to do is we're going to flatten along here because the hangar isn't meant to be accessible by anyone but someone who can get through the checkpoints. So now we need the road to connect over here. So we're going to go to manage, go back to our splines, and we're going to find the location that our splines ended at. We're going to adjust. So here we go. So now we're going to find the spline and then go along. So what this is going to do is, since we're going from start all the way to the finish point, so we can actually go kind of, what's going on here? We can kind of slide it along a bit better. Slide it along down here, and that keeps clicking off of it. So there we go. So now we've got an actual point for it to go into and then go over and connect. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to segments, and we're going to drag in this road. After we click the little plus on spline meshes, the little arrow drop down, we can drop it right there. So now we're using this road mesh. We need to rotate it sideways. So we need to change the adjust. There we go. So now we're using this specific road for the entire thing. And of course we'll have to go through and make sure each point is adjusted properly. And the great thing about using the landscape one is that it'll change the landscape scale to match underneath the road. So we need to make the scale rise up a bit. There we go. It should help it reach above the little landscape bits. So now we can go over to paint. I already removed the grass from my river dirt, so I'm going to use my river dirt to paint along here. Use the strength. Now I can paint along and use that to hide all the grass along where the road is. There we go. So, of course, we're going to have to clean this up later. As is with everything you have to do on level design. Now I can create a whole area for this, though. Here we go. So now, with all this set up, I can save. I can move these meshes over and match it to the road we've got going on. So we're not going to use those roads because they don't work super well. So we use them for how we did last time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to my cityscape pack. Now we're going to use my rural gas station pack and use the same roads we used last time. So mesh, I go in here and go type in road and drag it into the spine. There we go. Of course, I need to readjust the X and Y. There we go. So now we've got a road that goes along from the start all the way to the ending area. We could delete a few points along the way because it'll automatically adjust between them. So what we can do now is we can actually take these points and raise them up a little bit to where they actually match more of a going down feel. Really get our path set up right. So if we go back over here, we come over, we step up. And we got this epic view of the spot that we needed to get to. So we come up here, and now we see the location we're going to. And it's pretty far away. We can actually shrink down how far we need to go to get there. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take this and these and find a better eye-pleasing spot for it to be. So we don't want them to have to travel for too long to get there. There we go. That's a bit better of a location, maybe a little bit more to the left. Back forward, now back to the right. About right there is a good little area. We're going to turn it a bit. There we go. So now the player's got a bit of depth to look at. So what we can do now is we can just take our flatten tool and go across from here and go underneath the bunker. So we keep that same exact height it was before. And now we've got a much more defined distance we're wanting it to actually be at. So it's constantly adjusting and getting it to how you want it to be and testing to really find a good fix point. So now I can actually raise up all over here. And what I can do here is I can go to manage and I can start deleting some of the landscape that I don't need. So I'm going to go to 2. So there we go. I don't need any of this landscape right there. So there we go. So now we go back to our spline. Find its last few points. Cut it out of the mountain. And then now we can bring it on down to the new one. There we go. So it was as simple as that. A little adjust. Sculpt, flatten, go across. And you'll probably, in some studios, you'll do this a lot. This redesign, build, redesign, build, redesign, build, redesign. Because you want to work on it until you've got something that's really working well, rather than just doing it and saying it works. All right, so we got a little gap right here we can kind of edit. Because we wanted this to all to fit a bit closer to the edge barrier. You can actually delete this one. And this one too. Turn this one a bit. Slide this one over. There we go. So now the road kind of goes on down. Now we need to sculpt along to kind of match here. So what we're going to do here for the spline is I'm going to go to manage, I'm going to go to my spline, I'm going to go to segments, and I'm actually going to reverse by going negative on the scale so I can get the railing on the opposite side. So I want this railing to act as a kind of edge point to make it to where the player is subconsciously being told, hey, you don't go that way, you don't just go over, you have to work your way around. And we want this little cliff here to always act as a deterrent, as a way of showing why the character doesn't just go on down and go through. So you come on down, you peek over, you see the hangar over there now, and now we've got this area over here that could be used for our little secondary area. So with this all in mind, I can repaint here. Hold shift and click to remove any layer that you're clicked on. Alright, so now I can paint along this new area. And now we've got a grassless little slot here. Now we're already getting to the part where where we have the other map at. So what we need to do now is we need to go back into the splines. And play around with them a bit. Because we don't want it to be right against that edge right there. There we go. We don't want it to feel like it just instantly suddenly started to drop down either. There we go. So now it's more of a smooth go down. Now we can hit flatten, go from here and go over. This is where our other little checkpoint will be. So this is where the guards have their checkpoint to block the player off from entering, and this is why they need that other path. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to sculpt up to the location over here. And we're going to do that with a bit of the map, and with a bit of the landscape spline being used as well. So smooth, smooth, smooth. We need it. We need a bit more of that extra. So smooth. Now we're going to go back into our spline and raise it up. So this is how we're going to hide the edge of the map. So it might slowly go up, but we need it to kind of go out of view too. So the road turns so sharp there because we want it to kind of leave the view of the player fully. So the player can't go past right here. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to add in a single, we'll add two. Add in two little bit of landscape pieces over here, and we're going to sculpt with the smooth tool, the flatten tool, all the way over to the edge. What this will allow us to do is kind of hide where the road is going. Here we go. River, dirt, smooth. So there we go. Now we've got a little path for our road to go up and leave fully. So this is where we take our little background mountains over here and bring them over to here to where the player doesn't know that it ends right there. So when they peek over, they'll see the mountain off in the distance. You also need to make sure that it's not able to be seen as the little gap from the other point in the map. There we go. So no spot should you be able to see the gap there on the entire map. That's playable. So there we go. So now we have trees that we need. So we go into our rainforest and we grab a few trees. Well, we'll worry about the trees later. Right now we just want to get the landscape usable and set in place. So now we've got all this set up. I'm going to go use the flatten tool again to kind of give this a bit more of a layer set than just that single flat wall along there. I'm going to use the erosion tool now to kind of dig down to where dirt has been falling off the side of these. There we go. So now we're creating this little textured edge. Now we can smooth and weaken the smooth. There we go. And then we'll put a fence around this area later. So there we go. Now I've got a set going over how to make this landscape into that area with some background that hides the mess. So we need to take this and kind of duplicate. We're going to drop it on down. We're going to slide it over a bit more. All right. There. So we need it to be able to hide those little issues that we have in the map itself. Little extra bit of skin right there. You can slide it over there. There we go. Now we got a little mountain going on. We need to turn it so we get better shadows. There we go. And then of course now we can kind of smooth and flatten out these little areas here to kind of blend into that mountain edge a bit better. So now you're kind of seeing that it just blends in. The materials don't necessarily perfectly match, but they're not going to unless you have one that's directly associated with the pack, or you make it yourself. So here we go. Now we've got a full landscape that is usable in the end. So now we could take some sculpt and kind of, not sculpt, we can take smooth, kind of run along the area, kind of make everything match together a bit better, at least for the most part. And then we'll go through and add texture later. Now I need to smooth it so that way we could put trees on it a bit better. So there we go. There we go. So now we've got a landscape that looks rather nice and usable. And you almost can't tell the gap right here from the landscape and the background mountains. So now we would start adding in our trees. But I'm going to get a little flatten tool and kind of go right there. There we go. There's a weird little spot right there. So what we need now is, we know we're going to have the area here, so we're going to kind of paint out an area using the river dirt. So that we don't have grass in this spot. So we know where we're going. So there we go. So now we know where we want our little lookout and obstacle to be. So let's add a few trees in. Take this tree, the one we had before. New tree. Let's go with this tree. And we'll go with this tree. Two trees that are kind of similar. So I'm going to use foliage paint density 0.007 so I can paint along here. I still have a good set. 7 might be a little too dense still. So I can paint along here. Oh, it's because my brush. So I need to paint along here. Make sure nothing is colliding too hardcore. Go, and now we can kind of go and paint. All areas that aren't super playable, we can throw in some trees. So now I've already messed up. So what I need to do is I need to get rid of all these trees. And I need to click them. And I'm going to turn off align to normal. There we go. So now they won't turn and get angled. And now you'll notice that everything seems rather uniform. It looks beautiful, but it's super uniform. So what I'm going to do to get around that is I'm going to take my trees. I'm going to turn off normal again. I'm going to set it to 0.85 and 0.5 because the trees are already pretty large, so I'm going to shrink them down a little. Now I'm going to get a bit less of a super uniform and get more of a dynamic range from these trees. So now we've got this nice blanket along, but what if I don't want a super strong blanket? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these trees again, and down here on the thing, you'll see a ground slope angle. 45 is the max that it can do. So I shrink this down to about 30. In areas with hills, like these mountains, it'll get rid of where I can paint some of the trees to give us that texture back from the mountain in the background. So now we've got gaps in the trees. There we go. Now we just paint our trees around. Now we can go down here and paint in here now too. Let's get rid of our tree in the center. Wrong thing. Delete our tree. So here we go. So now because we measured it earlier, everything can be painted in there. And from our point that we can see over, we get a beautiful view directly of the hangar. And so now we can paint trees along here. And parts right there. And now we get the rest of the landscape. And now we also need the area where the player can see, but it isn't directly what the player can access. All right, so now we've got this area that is set up. Our trees are around. Of course, we still need to do some bit of touch-ups and everything to really make this area look nice. And then, of course, we can run our noise over it to kind of add a bit of depth to the ground instead of just being flat. Here we go. There we go. So now it's not just super flat. And if we do a flatten right here, we can put rocks around that the player can't go over and can't go around. So there, now we got our area set up to where we can build our point right here. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that there's at least trees right there. So now it's blocking off our view right off the bat of over there. So when we look down and we move down here, we kind of want it to where we need to open up a little bit. So there we go. So now when the player's up here, if they do look around, they'll be able to see the checkpoint over there. So they'll see the hangar they need to get to, which is the main point. But then if they look over, they'll see the first checkpoint that they need to get around. And that'll kind of guide their eyes on where to go, and it'll tell them where they need to be traveling to get forward in the game. There we go. Add a little flatten area here, so when you're down there, you don't just see off into the empty void. There we go. So this is a baseline this is a baseline landscape set up in order to be able to make a playable level out of it. So we've got our starting area, our peaked over, we see our little hangar down there. Then over there we have the area set up for our little checkpoint. So this is where I'm going to stop the video here. I'm going to make this into a whole series because this is going to take a while to do. So I want to do some longer form formats, but this requires a lot more time that just can't be done in one video. So I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all learned something about how to design the landscape and work with layers and everything in order to actually prepare the level for when you're getting to the gameplay portions and guiding the player and everything. I know we've gone over a lot of it, almost all of it in separate videos, but we haven't actually talked about and tackled doing it in straight one go. So yeah, here we go. Now we've got a fully functional little landscape. Of course, there's going to be touch-ups later, and then we'll redesign some of it in the end if we need to. But currently, it's just to be able to get the testing phases of the game going. Because you want to be able to test the game as fast as possible. So you want to design it to work through and be playable. You don't have to make it look extremely functional right off the bat. You don't have to make it look extremely beautiful right off the bat. It's function first, then beauty. So once it's functional, then you can take your long time making it look really nice. But this time I've only had time to sculpt and get it usable. So yeah, I hope you all learned something, and I hope you all have a good day. Tune in next time to build the little area over there.